the long-anticipated Resident Evil 3 Remake was released this weekend, and I've played the game through multiple times. And in this video, we're going to talk about the game, some of the things that I liked, some of the things that I didn't so much like, and some things that I wish were implemented into the game. So sit back, relax, this is going to be one heck of a ride. So first we're going to talk about the presentation of the game, and it follows suit very similarly to the Resident Evil 2 remake. In fact, it actually uses the same engine. The game starts with Jill in her room, and we get a first-person perspective of some things that are going on. Starts off with a nightmare, but when she awakes, the nightmare truly begins. The Nemesis comes crashing through the wall, and he is a towering beast. From this point on, the game is super high octane. You're in a high action scenario, moving from scene to scene, and it seems as though you can never really catch your breath throughout the entire journey of Resident Evil 3. I think the Nemesis atmosphere is something to behold. I think that it really works well with this game and this title. Starting from beginning to end, you're constantly on edge. You never know when Nemesis is going to come in crashing through a wall and destroying your hopes and dreams. The dodge mechanic is back from the original Resident Evil 3, and it's integrated quite well. It is still a bit wonky. It doesn't quite seem to work all the time, but that's kind of what we expect from a Resident Evil game, as we know that a big part of the challenge to these games is literally just controlling your character, and it's a skill that takes a little bit of time to fully master, and by the end I was implementing it quite well, dodging and using the slow-mo in order to cap these zombies right in their dome piece. The pacing of the game moves quite well, and I love the way that the difficulty ramps up as you get further into the game and you progress through different areas. A lot of the old enemies are back. We have the Brain Sucker, the Hunter Gamma, the Hunters are around, and we also have, obviously, the Nemesis. And one of the cool things that the Nemesis does in this title is he uses his tentacle in order to infect zombies, and it causes them to have a characteristic that's very similar to the Resident Evil 4 zombies when the goo and things would come out the top of the head and they're slicing you from far away. Just as in the original title, the Nemesis transfers his form 3 times. He goes from the basic Nemesis to the second form, and then he hits his final form, which is the most difficult to defeat. Questionable, I don't know, maybe the second form, but all in all, the character is a very formidable foe in all of his forms. So there were some changes to the game, and a lot of these changes I actually enjoyed. So there's no more ammo machine where you have to carry this thing around that takes up an inventory spot in order to put our gunpowders into this machine and crank out bullets. All we have to do is combine the ammunition powders and we're good to go. And I think that is a really awesome addition. It allows you to really flow through the game a little bit more seamlessly, and I think not impeding progress allows for a much better gameplay experience. The enhancement to the graphics and the fine detail allow you to immerse yourself into the environment that is Resident Evil 3. It's super eerie. Some of the dark spots are very difficult to maneuver. You can't see outside of your flashlight range as long as you make your screen the proper darkness that the game wants you to employ. And when you do that, it makes the experience of Resident Evil 3 so much better. The change in character designs for all of our main characters are definitely pleasing. I like the way that they look, particularly Carlos. I think that they did the best job with him, and the way that they allowed for Carlos and Jill to interact with one another and form a mutual type of relationship throughout. And you can tell that both care about one another. And I think developing the story in that way was a great dynamic to introduce here in Resident Evil 3, and it even portrays itself more strongly here in the remake. My favorite area of the entire game was the hospital. It's really eerie, there's a lot of darkness, and it's a great atmosphere for a horror setting. Hospitals are always one of the sickest places, one of the sickest places to have a horror setting. Also, the climatic ending to the hospital area where Carlos is fighting off hordes of zombies and hunters in order to allow for Jill to stay safe inside of the sick room is a great way to finish up the hospital. And then once you get control of Jill, you're able to backtrack through, get a lot of items, including the Magnum with Jill's lockpick. So those were some things that I liked that were changed, but there are a few things that I didn't like about the remake, and I feel like Nemesis should be around more in the second half of the game. It almost seems like Nemesis kind of disappeared for a large chunk of the game, and I think that that might be due to the fact that you're Carlos for a lot of the hospital, and you know, Nemesis isn't out to kill Carlos, he's programmed to go after the STARS members. So with Nemesis, you know, being in the background, I guess you could say, for that portion of the game as you're controlling Carlos, I think they could have jazzed that up a little bit. Maybe have the Nemesis come in to attack Jill while she's passed out, and you have to protect Jill in that way. I think that might be a little bit better of a sequence. Just get that Nemesis in there a little bit more often. They also eliminated the choice making. If you remember back to the original Resident Evil 3 game, there were scenarios where you could select different choices and change the outcome of the game, and it would put you in different areas depending on what you pick. I thought that this kind of added a lot of replay value to Resident Evil 3, the OG version, because you could play through the game multiple different ways, and it really enticed you to go back and play the game over and over again in order to, you know, check out different areas that you weren't able to check out in your previous playthrough. The thing that bothers me the most is the fact that they left out the entire clock tower section, and that portion of the game sticks in my head from the original Resident Evil 3 as the area that I remember most clearly. And eliminating that section and just having the clock tower there for the boss fight doesn't really sit all that well with me. I think also adding some of the sections that they left out of the original Resident Evil 3 would lengthen this game. And this game is very short. I think that the game should be longer. So we're going to talk about some things that I wished happened, and that's the first thing we're going to talk about, the short length of the game. So one of the best things about the Resident Evil 2 remake is the fact that you play as Leon and Claire. We get two different quests. Both quests were expanded upon and made larger. They're more epic than the original, whereas Resident Evil 3 is about the same length as the original, and it is redesigned a bit. The redesign is great. I think they did a great job with that, but I think that expanding the actual gameplay time would have been a very good move on Capcom's part. By keeping the average runtime at about 5.5 hours, I think that this title is a bit short. I think leaving out a lot of the key integral parts, including the clock tower from the original, was a mistake on their end. When you make something that is a remake, it's reimagined, we have the technology to do it, we should be expanding upon that and not limiting it. Now, does that mean that there's no replay value with this game? Absolutely not. There's a ton of replay value with Resident Evil 3, the remake. I think that the way that the game moves, the way it progresses, it's so action-packed. I think that a lot of people will have tons of fun playing this game over and over. I've already played it twice. Also, being able to go back into the shop and purchase new items and different power-ups and things definitely increases the replay value for this title. But I still think that a 5.5 hour gameplay experience is rather short. Also, one of the other big issues that I have with this game is the add-on of Resistance. So they put all this time and energy into this multiplayer game where if this online player pool dries up, this game is dead in the water. It's going to be useless over time. And I think that that is a huge detriment to this game. If you can't find people to play Resistance with, the game mode basically ceases to exist. I also personally am not that interested in the way that Resistance plays. That may vary from person to person. Different people enjoy different things, but for me personally, it's just not a gameplay mode that I like. Oftentimes, I also go in and it seems as though the mastermind host, they're lagging, or it typically says something along those lines as I play, and then you get like dogs running around, they're teleporting all over the place, there's a bunch of lag, things are going bonkers. Even in a good connection, it's still not a game mode that I personally enjoy. What I wish they implemented instead was a mercenaries mode and a team mercenaries mode. I think having a single player type of add-on would bring much more replay value to the game as well as longevity. I still go back and I play these mercenary game modes on previous Resident Evils, particularly Resident Evil 4. Also, having the ability to play in a single player mode like this really enhances the gameplay. You can play Resistance single player, but it's nowhere near as fun as it is playing in the mercenaries, at least to me. Overall, I've had a great experience playing Resident Evil 3 the remake. The reimagined zombies, the character models, the environment, the pacing of the game, the high-flying action, Nemesis always on your tail, except for that little part of the second half of the game, was all a great experience. I definitely would recommend it. For someone that isn't an extreme Resident Evil fan, the $60 price tag for only 5.5 hours of gameplay could be a bit daunting. Some people may not want to drop $60 on a 5.5 hour game. For me personally, I had no issue with it. I loved the game. I'm going to play it multiple times over, and to me it was worth it. If you're not an extreme Resident Evil fan, maybe just wait till it goes on sale, but it's definitely worth your time and worth a playthrough. So what I want you to do down below, leave a comment, let me know what you thought of Resident Evil 3 the remake. Also, let me know what you think of Resistance. I'm definitely interested in hearing your input. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click that subscribe button and make sure you click the bell so you get notified whenever I post new content. As always, I want to thank you for checking in. It's Gleez signing out, and continue to game strong.